Thousands of students have taken to the streets of London protesting against rising university fees and the loss of financial support now. So it's the second anniversary of huge demonstrations when tuition prices trebled. Archie Sarah is in the English capital for us. Sarah, very nice to see you. So what's the mood like among the protesters now there?
Well, what a day for it. Cold, wet and miserable. Unpleasant conditions, but not as unpleasant. Some of the students we've been talking to say is having to pay up to £9,000 a year in tuition fees. And we saw thousands of protesters take to the streets earlier on. They walked all the way past Parliament Square. They're gathered at the moment in Kennington Park, which is just behind me there. The weather's certainly seen it disband a little bit, and actually amongst the protesters themselves today we saw a little bit of disagreement. The NUS had an agreed route that they were following, ending, as we said, where we are in Kennington. There was a bigger group of protesters who didn't want to march down that way, who wanted to march into Parliament Square in front of Westminster, really make their point, and that didn't happen. That way was completely blocked by the police. So a little bit of disagreement amongst the protesters themselves, but as we said, thousands turning out to take part in that march, primarily against the huge tuition fees, that rise that we've seen in the last few years, and also against cuts to education costs as well.
Give us some facts. Exactly how much harder has it become to get a higher education there?
Well, as we said, this was a promise by the Lib Dems before the last election, that they wouldn't raise the tuition fees, and of course we saw that big U-turn on that when indeed tuition fees were raised. So a couple of years ago you had a huge amount of backlash from students about that. It's very tough because they said at the time, even up until the point they were bringing in these rise in tuition fees, that not every university was supposed to do the very maximum amount, that £9,000 per year. And actually what we've seen is a lot of the universities are charging that top amount. The people we spoke to said it makes it a lot harder for everyday people who don't have that sort of cash readily available to go to university, and a lot of concern as well that this is sort of changing towards the American system. They don't want a situation where if you're rich and stupid you can still get into university. If you're very well educated, you really want to go and continue further education but you don't have the cash, well, that way's blocked off to you, and there's a big concern that maybe we're going to see that happening here.
So has this protest movement grown then since 2010 when the first students' protests occurred then?
To be honest with you, the figures don't really match up. Today, a much smaller turnout than we've seen in the past. We were speaking to the people who came today to try and figure out exactly why that was. A lot of the protesters who went to recent events, to recent protests, had said that kettling that you see happening quite a lot with the police in London really puts them off. They don't really like that. Also, of course, the top-up fees, the tuition fees have already come in. This is in place right now. This is what people are paying right now. So some of the people saying, look, we turned out and, tens and tens of thousands of people took to the streets and nothing changed. They're not listening. Perhaps that's got something to do with less people turning out. So you have seen a bit of a decline in the numbers that have come out. But of course, I think a lot of people saying that this now does need to be a wider debate. One of the chants today amongst the protesters was that education is a right, not a privilege. Well, a lot of people said that is something that needs to be discussed. Is further education something that should be available to everyone? Should it be? And I think that's a discussion that needs to be had in the coming months and years.
Archie Sarah reporting there from London. Sarah, many thanks indeed.